will be Danuta Keane, former Guardian journalist, and Warren Morgan, who used to be the leader of Brighton City Council and is a Labour Party activist. And the discussion will be... Hang on. Former Guardian journalist. Oh, sorry, there's a bit of background sound. To recap, because I mistimed the entrance of that. This is a live stream discussion that will be taking place in a few minutes on the next general election, hosted by me, Paul Bergin, moderator of Mars Hill blog, and it will be on my blog, which is at paulbergin.blogspot.com. Or if you're watching that there, it's also on YouTube page, and some of you will be coming in to link via Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, etc., and to which I say hello, welcome. And yes, the discussion is basically about how things are in the next GE. Just give me a few moments. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Danuta has arrived. Okay. And she is in. Okay. Just connecting to audio.
Oh, hello.
Hello. How are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you? I'm not sure what I can see. Can you see me? Is my camera on?
Your camera isn't on, but obviously the sound. Yes, it's.
It's on now.
Yes. Yes, I was just introducing you, and then I got your message that you were having difficulty getting in. And part of me was talking to fill airtime. Part of me, my brain was going, "What do I do? What do I do?" And then I saw the waiting room. So yes, how are you anyway?
I'm well, thank you. Yes, really trying to make sure I'm not looking at myself.
You're looking attractive and healthy, and as always. So I would.
Well, it's the wonders of makeup and the right lighting. I always remember seeing an interview with Ruby Wax where she said that when she interviewed Madonna had made a big deal about her lighting. And when they actually finally screened it, she realised that Madonna had got her lighting wrong and Ruby Wax looked fantastic and Madonna didn't.
Well, I'm not a fan of Madonna as a person, so that doesn't surprise me at all. So
yeah, but yeah, it's my daughter's in the background playing a computer game, so hopefully you can't see that because I'm sure we're not allowed to show these things. So you might see dogs coming in and go and out.
Yes, and Warren Morgan is coming in now as well, which he should be. There's always that 15 seconds or so, I think, between when you.
Is he there? I can see somebody's trying to connect.
And then when yeah. It's always that slight delay.
You've frozen.
Well, you froze. I could hear it, but I'm hoping. Yeah, I'm
you're back.
Yeah, I'm hoping things are all right. But which is
I just got to keep an eye on my battery life. I know.
Yeah, I'm taking no prisoners this time because I remembered the last time the battery went there. But I've attached the laptop to a cable, so it's charging as we speak.
Well, I've got 62% on it. It should be fine.
Yeah, if you go from 62 to 0 in less than an hour, then you
really are in trouble.
Yeah,
you're using your iPhone.
Oh, good God. Yeah,
my iPhone seems to be draining ever since the latest update. I don't know. It's driving me mad.
I always find it a pain when my wife Rachel and I, when we're driving somewhere, we need to use sat nav, and some reason we can't use it, so we use the map on the phone, and of course you've got to make sure it's charging in the
in the
correct way to do it,
car.
because in a car, because otherwise it will go from 62 to 30%
Yeah. Yeah.
in about at the
10
end, you
minutes.
know. Yeah.
No, I've found it's been really rubbish. So mine's got a lot worse recently. Oh, hello. You've
Yes.
frozen again.
Well, not long, but very quickly enough for about half hour. Yeah. Oh, well, hang on. Ask to unmute. I think Warren's having difficulties because he's put himself on mute.
Hmm.
We can't see him.
Hello.
You're here.
He needs to put his
I'm-
camera on now.
I'm here, but it's not letting me start video for some reason. So bear with me.
Yes. In the beginning, there's a Box Connect 2, and it might be you missed it.
There we go. Allow.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is technology. It's
It's a joy.
I was going to say, Rachel and I are having a lot of things with the sat nav on the moment because we're spending half the time going into mid Bedfordshire, which because we actually live in northeast Bedfordshire constituency, so we're literally just outside. Live literally a few minutes drive away from Nadine Dorris's seat. So we've been helping where we can. Not Nadine Dorris.
It's a bit like Where's Wally, isn't it, really?
Oh, good God.
Could it be more appropriate?
If I got £1 for every Canvas session where someone says to me, where Vote gives me a criticism of Nadine Dorris or gives me a certain look,
yeah,
I would be worth it. And I do start off with in the Canvas dummy, I start off with assuming Nadine Dorris does go on her pledge that she made back in June to resign with immediate effect.
World's longest resignation.
Which is a bit brutal, I twist the knife in as soon as I can.
It is. Yeah, it is the longest resignation in history. I think it's.
Oh God, she's longer than Liz Truss's premiership now. But yes. Anyway, for those of you who've joined, just to reiterate again, we have with here Danita Keane, former Guardian journalist, and Warren Morgan, the former leader of Brighton City Council, and we're about to discuss rather, the next general election and all the ramifications around it. And, first of all, I mean, I get the feeling the Prime Minister is going to hold this on for as long as possible. So the question is, do you think he's going to hold it all the way to January 2025? Do you think he'll use a bit of common sense, but hold it long and hold it in October? Or do you think he won't take it all the way and will mix it with the May elections? Or none of those options?
I think it's, as the famous Clinton slogan was, it's the economy, stupid, isn't it? I mean, it really is about what's going on with the economy. And whether that's that they think it's starting to improve, so now is the time for them to absolutely go in and benefit from that, or whether they think all their advice is that it's about to tank completely, so they need to get out and not take the blame for that. Either way, I mean, I think a lot of people are thinking about May next year. I'm thinking of spring elections, but I think they'll hang on as long as they think they can get away with it. Yeah, they're so tone deaf.
Oh yeah, it's shocking, really. What do you think, Warren?
I think October is possibly the most likely. I think yes, it is. It's always the economy. Sunak wants to fight it on culture wars and stop the boats and all of those things, but they're having no resonance with the public at all.
Yeah.
I think it is always the economy, but let's not forget that in '97, John Major had a strongly recovering economy and got absolutely solidly beaten then.
Yeah.
So I think there comes a point where a party is just done. They've been in office for so long. I think the electorate comes to a settled view. And a poll I think that came out yesterday, I think it was in the Independent, said that the government isn't being credited for the slowing down of inflation. So I think it's where things do improve, the government's just not going to get the credit for it, because they've been saying all along the failure of the economy has nothing to do with them. It's Ukraine or whatever.
Yeah, but what's the point of being in government if the failure of the economy has nothing to do with you? It's, I mean, they're so lost in credibility. I don't know if any of you saw the Louise Casey interview in The Guardian at the weekend, where she said for the first time, rather than being an independent, she's come out completely behind Starmer. And she said that this government has to be out, that they're redundant of ideas. And what had turned her completely was seeing Jacob Rees-Mogg lounging on the benches in the House of Commons. And she said it just summed everything up. And I think the optics of that moment and the optics of the Queen in the middle of COVID sitting alone while they were having parties, people don't forget. And that was the thing about John Major. It came after years of sleaze. It came after the dreadful impact on the economy, people losing their homes. The mess that had happened on Black Friday. Was it Black Wednesday? Had so many these days, but was my birthday, so I remember it. But
remember to wish us
people don't forget and they don't forgive. And I think now I've got friends who have seen their mortgages go up to eye-watering amounts.
Yeah. Rachel and I were I'm not going to discuss Rachel and my financial affairs, but Rachel and I were very lucky, is all I can say. But I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because with the '97 election, you can almost, if you could pinpoint an actual day where the Conservatives lost that general election, you could almost pinpoint it exactly to the 15th of September 1992 with Black Wednesday. And I'm wondering...
It was 16th. It was my birthday.
But
yeah. Oh, hello.
I apologise. Yes, I do apologise. Incident. It's all there. Sorry, I thought there was something wrong. But what would you say was the pinpoint with this one? Do you think it was the Truss premiership, or do you think it was decided before then with the Partygate?
I think it's been a series of events. I think we saw it also with Gordon Brown's government. The fact that Labour had been in for so long. I think there comes a point after, say, 3 terms where the governments are particularly vulnerable to events within their control, without their control. And you mentioned that John Major and sleaze, that was within his control, but other things were outside of his control. And the financial crash was outside of Gordon Brown's control, but there was no way of escaping the blame for it because the government were the incumbents, Labour were the incumbents. And I think the events that we've had both within the Conservative Party and outside over the last 5 years have all snowballed into this. Just we've had enough of them.
Yeah. I think with Gordon Brown, the thing that did it for him though was the fact that he'd given the press to believe that he was going to hold the elections in the October. And then he went back on his word, and they don't forgive that. They felt that they'd been made to look fools, and as soon as he lost them, he was a dead man walking, and he wasn't going to get the credit for what he'd done. I'm sorry about the dog noises in the background. Sorry. I'm
That's
so
fine.
sorry about that.
It's fine. It's fine. I hardly noticed until you said so.
But it was not my stomach. But yeah, I think that was a big thing. Whereas with this government, I mean, I can't remember in my entire lifetime a government where there's been so many points that you could remember, whether it's, you know, the COVID parties, whether it's, you know, Johnson refusing to leave, whether it's even the fact that we have a prime minister who doesn't know how to send proper tweets about football. You know, it's the level of incompetence, and it's one thing after another after another.
Yeah.
You know, he leaves nothing on the pitch, literally, doesn't he? It
reminded me that the football thing did remind me of that time, I think a while ago, when the Corbynistas were still seemed to be a bit more powerful than they actually were. And there was I think it was 2 years ago, the European Championships, and there was a crucial England match, and Ash Sarkar, the Owen Jones, usual suspects, photographed themselves as a you know, watching the football drink, and it looked so contrived. The photo, it was just, oh dear, it's a goal, and I think there was something similar with Sarah Davy and a couple of Lib Dems. It's like there's a part of me, it's like,
yeah, it's dad dancing, isn't
actually your thing. Don't. You can't fake being a football fan. It's like you know that time in the 90s where it became in vogue for everyone to say they're into football, and you could spot the fake ones very quickly because they would do the talk, and then when you asked them more pertinent questions, they would almost crumble. So yeah,
I just think it's the equivalent of the political equivalent of dad dancing. It's embarrassing. It's inauthentic. It's a sort of, please don't say anything else. Don't say any more. You know, whether it's Cameron not remembering which team he supports, or, as you say, all the sort of blokey camaraderie in the pub. It just,
I mean, it's
embarrassing, isn't it?
It is. You say dad dancing. I always use that kind of argument when because I hated the political program this week with a passion. I really didn't like it, and the best way I could describe how I felt about it emotionally was, it's like, imagine being a teenager and seeing your parents at the school disco boogieing away on the floor. That was the kind of nails in the palm of your hands feeling. Incidentally, my parents never did that. In case anyone got, but it is that kind of feeling that I had about this week. So yeah, dad on the dance floor is a very good thing. But I mean, we've seen how the Conservatives are at the moment. How do you feel things are with Labour and the Lib Dems at this point?
It was interesting. I think it was the New Statesman podcast this week said, you know, there isn't. They reflected on some of the people saying, you know, there isn't the enthusiasm for Labour that there was in '97, and certainly for those of us that were there, and they went back and looked at some of the editorials from the time, we kind of look back and think there was more enthusiasm than there actually was. And I think we're at that weird stage in that we know an election's coming, but it's still, as we were saying before, possibly another year away. And we've seen that the Tories will ruthlessly pick Labour policies and copy them and steal them. So obviously Keir Starmer can't set out his stall now and can't put it all out there, because he's got to have something in reserve for the short campaign and things like that. So yeah, there are going to be critics on the left and the right who will constantly say he hasn't got policies and he hasn't put it out there. But we'll see more in a few weeks' time at the conference, and then obviously once it becomes clear when Sunak is going to the country, then there'll be a whole load more. But then, of course, as with Tony Blair in '97, a lot of the sort of quite radical stuff that he did wasn't even in the manifesto. So it's not going to be set out there next week or next month or whenever, and people really are just going to have to be patient, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult for Labour in a way, because, you know, in the way that the Tories milked it for everything when they got in 2008, in 2012, that they milked it for everything because they were saying there was no money left in the coffers and that. But Labour really don't know what money is left, what money we've got, because this government has done a really good job of bankrupting the country. I mean, you know, at least the money that was being spent in 2008 and 2009 was being spent on trying to save the economy, whereas now it's going into, you know, various friends and family of the Tories. I mean, that's the big scandal of COVID. And I think there's other things that we've got to watch as well, because that COVID inquiry, and we've seen quite a bit, but there's more going to come with that as well. And I just think that I think Labour have got to sort of hold fire to an extent, because they don't know what they're inheriting. I do wish they'd go in a bit harder at times with the Tories, because they are so discreditable, and there's a level of dishonesty in public life. I'm not going to put it harder than that, but I've never witnessed. I mean, it's
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I mean, you only have to look at, say, Suella Braverman's career as Home Secretary, and the only thing I'll credit Liz Truss with is that she sacked Suella Braverman days before she herself resigned. That's the only thing in Truss's premiership where I go, yeah, that was the right call.
Yeah.
And then of course she comes back and all of it, everything, and it's like, that is just one of a whole load of examples of decency in public life that I've never seen. Sorry, I'm almost on a rant now.
I'm so sorry about the dogs.
No, don't worry. With you. No, dogs are in control but the rest of the time. But I mean, I can think of when the government, the Thatcher Major government, you could criticise them. We could criticise them, and I certainly did. But I think we could all think of several individual high-ranking Conservatives who say, okay, we disagree with them politically, but I respect them as a human being, and I actually quite like them. And I'm finding it hard to think of any individual like that, really, when you hear of too many of the, you know, trying to think of a polite way on the live stream of describing them.
The decent ones were purged by Boris Johnson ahead of the last election.
Rory Stewart,
pro-Europe,
Rory Stewart, Antoinette Sandbach. You know,
the people they kicked out. When you think that was a party that kicked out somebody like Ken Clarke, who
Michael Heseltine,
really loyal to the party and had held high office and had been very competent ministers, whether you agree with their politics or not. They have been competent, and you feel with all of them, Heseltine and all of those, and Thatcher as well, that they did actually feel a sense of duty, and they were in public office because they had a sense of serving the public, not self-serving. You know, whether you agreed with them or not, there was a sense of vision. Whereas I look at someone like Nadine Dorries. How the heck did she end up being a politician? How did she become an MP?
It's the sheer brazenness of saying, I'm holding on as an MP until I get a proper answer as to why I haven't been given a peerage.
And you feel a bit like, well, you're sort of answering your own question, aren't you?
Exactly. It's the sheer brazenness. I mean, human nature being what it is, there have been politicians in the UK since time immemorial who regarded it as their right to have titles. I appreciate that, but this is the first time I've known it to be so, in this day and age anyway, to be so openly brazen in full public about it. I want a peerage. Why haven't I got a peerage?
And Boris Johnson's list, and now we've also got Liz Truss list, that these people are being, you know, to go into the Lords when you're a, was it 29-year-old with no experience, no sort of sense of having done anything apart from, you know, work experience. I mean, it's just absolutely, what worries me most about the next election is people will not vote, because I think faith in our public institutions has been eroded so much, and that frightens me. I think that's the most fearful part of all of it.
I wonder if that's the reason for the slightly restrained tone from the opposition front bench, because if it descends into a slanging match, if they don't appear like a sort of sensible government in waiting, that a statesperson, like in the way that we were talking about some of the Conservatives before, then will the public really just tar all of them with the same brush and switch off and, like you say, not vote? So I think they've got to project an air of dignity. I think there's also the factor that their predecessors, the Corbyn shadow cabinet, weren't restrained and made themselves, they could easily be portrayed as extreme, because some of them were, but
they also showed themselves to be amateurs, which they were as well.
No, that's a really good point. And yes, I mean, I don't think I think there's integrity among Starmer and co, and I think oddly that, you know, though they don't get the same amount of coverage, I think it comes over when you see somebody like Rachel Reeves being interviewed. You get the sense that this is a sensible person who understands how finances work, how global finance work, who understands the economy. You don't get the same feeling when you see Jeremy Hunt, who continually looks terrified in front of the cameras, and has basically ended up with that job not because of any ability, but because of whom he chose to support.
It's also, I'm reminded also slightly, I mean, echoing what you've both said, of a quote that's attributed to Napoleon, which is never interfere when your enemy is making a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think it's just let you, obviously in areas which affect the country, the running of the country, go in, you know, be the opposition that we're meant to be, but you know, it's picking the battles. There was one other guest I did invite to this who was unable to attend this evening, Tamsin Thomas, who's a Labour councillor in North Herts District Council, and talking about it's good. She did leave some points, and I thought, given the touching on the malaise that we've discussed about public life, it's a good thing to put in some of her comments. She said, part of the challenge is that for lots of people, politics just isn't the most important thing. People are apathetic. They want to see politicians just get on with it, and they don't necessarily care who. The real challenge is that we're living in extraordinarily challenging times, but the public don't even trust their government with the basics. Post-pandemic readiness, climate change, war in Europe, Brexit, devolution. These are generational issues that require a scale of ambition we have not seen since the moon landings. And what can we muster? A good royal wedding. That's old news. The Olympics, even older. But despite this, what people are crying out for is the basics: education, healthcare, housing. We have a government that needs to be extraordinary, but cannot manage ordinary. This is and then this is anyone's election. Basic competence and a sense of positivity for Britain. Our bit of Britain has changed a lot since the pandemic. There's a drift. The political base is really different. And people don't want pipe dreams, they want competence. They're done with the bombast of Boris, but they still crave his authenticity.
It's just a word I always find a bit odd about Boris Johnson, authenticity. You know, even
I get what she's trying to say. Yeah, she doesn't say that Boris Johnson's authentic. He came across as,
I know.
This is who I am. But I think she has a point. I mean, I think that was part of the appeal of Corbyn as well.
Yeah.
People want, and I think God help us, that was the appeal of Trump, or is the appeal of Trump in some quarters of the US, in that people say, well, this is what he. But we need to find ways of tackling that.
But I think those are within certain constituencies, and that was the problem with Corbyn.
Yeah.
Those people who were going knocking on door to door. I mean, the fact that they lost the red wall,
yeah,
it says it all. And that these are not people who should have been voting for, an Eton educated elitist, like Johnson. And they didn't trust Corbyn. And it's all very well to say, yeah, they want a level of authenticity. I mean, Johnson, he polls well within the party, but not nationally, not in the country. He was the least, and the same with somebody like Trump. Yeah, he might work well with the Republicans, the people who are, the converts love these people. But the general voter, I think she's right. The general voter wants somebody who is, authentic in terms of actually wanting the best for the national interests and the interests of the voters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And unfortunately, we don't have that, and we've not had that for a long time now.
Sorry, Warren, were you?
I was just going to reflect on that point, that the last election was fought between the two most unpopular main party leaders in history, and Johnson got his 80-seat majority by default. When you look back at the previous 3 Tory victories, none of them were particularly convincing. So it's artificially inflated that Conservative support, which makes them even more likely, I think, to face defeat. And yes, Boris Johnson's popularity was inflated by the media, by his fans, but he wasn't that popular amongst the electorate.
No, he wasn't. I mean, one of the things that we're going to see in this election are boundary changes and the new seats that are being. Have you both seen the proposed boundary changes that look all set to be nodded through?
I've not gone through them, and from the sort of polling reading that I've looked at, there's not that many projections, which I find quite surprising. From previous iterations, I think it will make about 10 seats different. Now, if you look at the polls, there's one poll out earlier this evening that put Labour on 50, the Tories on 25. That would be absolutely enormous landslide. But if you take the lowest poll this week, even the lowest lead for Labour would still produce 150-seat majority. So I think the effects of boundary changes would be minimal, unless the polls narrow, which I don't think they're going to. I think, as I said, the electorate is largely settled. The Labour's average lead has been the same since January, around 20 points. It's gone down to 15. It's gone up to 25, but it's kind of averaged around there. It doesn't seem that it will change in the next year. So I think any differences will be minimal. And you're looking at changes in places like Scotland, where the SNP are in free fall, which is terrible news for the Tories. They need the SNP to take seats from Labour continually, and they're not going to. And the Lib Dems not doing particularly well, but doing well enough to take a lot of seats from the Tories that might otherwise have been held. So it's a bit of a perfect storm for the Tories. I think if they're looking at the new seat boundaries to save them, it's not going to do it.
How are the Lib Dems doing in the West Country, which was at one point their old stomping ground?
And that's where they've been winning the odd by-election or two with massive swings. Obviously, the most recent by-election won by Labour on a massive swing. These are all things that have not been seen since the 90s. All of the portents in terms of election results and polling are all there. Everything still change, of course. Events, boys, they use this in politics. If there was an election held next month, Labour would win it with an absolute massive majority, which would be historic, really, coming from an historic defeat in 2019. But equally, it would be unprecedented for a Conservative incumbent government to win a fifth term with a fifth PM.
I mean, some polls have Rishi Sunak losing his seat. if Labour landslide or not, if Sunak loses his seat on election night, then that is really, I don't think there's been a sitting prime minister in well over a century who will have lost his or her seat. People cite
it'll be the
Arthur
Portillo
Balfour.
moment, won't it?
Yeah, people
and that's
cite
not, and it's even bigger than that.
Yeah, people cite Arthur Balfour in the January 1906 election, which had a Liberal landslide, but they forget that he was leader of the opposition at the time because the Conservative government resigned previous month, which was why there was the general election. But it's what I'm seeing is absolutely incredible. I'll give you two examples. My parents come from the Melton Mowbray area of Leicestershire. We joke, both sides family have joked, that if a dog stood with a blue rosette, it would get in. It is it's rural farming area. But what's happened is that with the boundary changes, the old seat of Rutland and Melton, with Melton Mowbray attached in the end, so Rutland becomes Rutland and Stamford. The parliamentary seat becomes Rutland and Stamford. Melton Mowbray and the surrounding villages, such as Ashby, Folville, Twyford, the Great Dalby, Little Dalby, Barsby, where my paternal grandparents lived, and Asforby, where my mum's parents live. And we'll get Syston added on. Now, Syston is technically a small town on its own, but it's essentially a suburb of Leicester. And now, in a general election night, if Labour do spectacularly well, that Labour could just scrape through with that. Now, can you imagine Melton Mowbray, the land of pork pies, which has you cut that pork pie, you see, blue jelly coming out of it. I mean, the thought of, that area is almost like home to me because of, moving around, growing up, and visiting both sets of grandparents in that area. But to imagine that being a Labour seat I just find it incredible. Yeah. And then, of course, I can't think unless Oliver Hill, the MP for North East Hertfordshire, is going to fight this election. It was rumored he might stand down. So whether he still keeps North East Herts because he has a strong personal vote is open now. But there's a new seat called Hitchin, which will be Hitchin and Harpenden. Harpenden will be got rid of, and this is Birmouth seat, by the way. And that will join Berkhamsted. Hitchin, the Hitchin bit, which Birmouth Army is going for, is basically Hitchin surrounding villages, but then the villages in mid Bedfordshire, northeast Bedfordshire, and small towns that are just over the border from Hertfordshire. So you will have places like, for those of you in the area who know the towns, Shefford and Langford, the village of Langford, which is a very large village in mid Bedfordshire, but in northeast Bedfordshire you've got Stopfold and Arlesey. And that, if there's a landslide, but if Labour have a comfortable majority, Hitchin would have a Labour MP for the first time in 50 years.
Well, one of the things
you're talking, just find these figures incredible.
But I think, everybody keeps going on about what happened in Uxbridge and as though Labour lost it. But that was an incredible turnaround.
Yeah.
We've not had that. Even in 97, we didn't win it.
No, we didn't get anywhere near it.
Sorry?
We didn't even get anywhere near it.
It was an incredible change. And that, the Tory press are really, really pushing the idea of ULEZ, which, let's remember, was Boris Johnson's policy. It's something completely taken on board from Boris Johnson's time as the London mayor. But to actually reduce that majority to 600 votes is incredible.
Yeah.
And the way that it was spun as being a Labour failure, no. That was an incredible moment. If they'd won it, it would have been even better. But people, we shouldn't forget how big that majority was.
No.
I think there's examples from all over. I mean, down here on the south coast, just along from Brighton and Hove, there's Worthing. When I was council leader back in 2015, and we had sort of meetings with other councils in the Greater Brighton area, there were no Labour councillors on Worthing Borough Council. It was Tory run. It's now Labour run, and even on a relatively modest swing, Peter Bottomley's seat is going to go.
Wow.
Peter Bottomley has been there forever.
He's the father of the house.
Yeah. So there are those safe Tory areas that just can't be counted on anymore. Part of that is demographic, but with the turnover in population, literally some of their vote is dying out. So they just don't have that bedrock to rely upon anymore. And in other parts of Sussex, Tory voters who would never contemplate voting Labour seem quite happy to go out and vote Green, because they're kind of NIMBYs with a different hat on. But to abandon the Tories for anyone else seems to spell bad news for them, even in true blue Tory Sussex.
I think it's also, there's a real disillusion with the quality of so many of these Tory MPs. I mean, this is what I think would be interesting in the Red Wall with those MPs, who are, quite a few of them, are the sort of people who are, put to stand because nobody expects them to win. I think we can say that quite safely about quite a few of those people. And their behaviour in power and the things that they've said are so disgraceful and so lacking in empathy for some of the poorest parts of the country. Down here, I'm in Hastings and Rye, and we've had Sally Ann Hart, who has been dreadful. Her voting record's not great. She's not really pushed the campaign and supported the campaign against sewage emissions into the sea down here. I mean, she's turned up for meetings or turned up for photo calls, but there's no real sense that she cares about the constituency in any meaningful way.
It's incredible. It's almost like you can. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, it's not even a joke. Some of them actually do it, but you get those who get really into become political nerds when they're teenagers to joining a party, and some of them do the thing of writing on a paper what they want to do, their life plan in politics, and it's. MP by the time I'm 25. I want to be Foreign Secretary by the time I'm 35. I want to be Prime. As if everything's going to fall. Heseltine actually did that when he was at Oxford and kind of regretted it. Although, funnily enough, it all turned out as he planned, apart from the Prime Minister bit. But with these lot, it's like it sounds like I'm picking on teenagers who do that, but I think that's part of growing up. But the thing is, I get the impression that these lot haven't grown up. Yeah. They're still in that mindset of this is my politics, this is my political CV, and they've forgotten a bit about public service. I mean, when you look at American politics, there's a lot to be thrown at the door against the Kennedy family. And a lot of it for good reason. But one thing you couldn't fault a lot of them is a sense of public service. This lot, you think, or even in this country, you look at some of the Conservatives, you can say with some in the past, I didn't like them and didn't like their politics, but they were, you couldn't fault them in being an assiduous constituency MP. I struggle to think with some of the high-ranking Conservatives, I struggle to see that sense of public service. Yeah. That both sides respected in each other.
Are we saying Lee Anderson isn't a political titan here?
I don't.
I mean, he isn't.
He basically. I mean, we know he more or less shot his bolt with the Labour. I'm going to have to put the lights on. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. He's,
So I was trying to control the lighting, and in the process, I ended up being shrouded in darkness. Which, you know, I need to be better at doing the lighting on this.
Yeah, 30p.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh dear. But he kind of shot his bolt with the Labour Party in the area, hasn't he? And now we won't ever. I don't think it's a secret. I think it's very obvious. We're not going to have him back if he ever decides to come back. But I mean, he's. Oh good God! Did you see the bit about him? It seemed like a parody about him lamenting his son becoming a vegetarian.
That is one of the funniest things I have seen on the internet, where he's talking about his son going off to university and how it has spoiled him and how he's frightened for him, and he's come back and he's confessed he's a vegetarian. It's hilarious. But it's just, they are, I mean, it's like Jonathan Pye, aren't they? Who needs comedians? Who needs satirists? They self-satirize all the time.
It's like that American satirist 50 years ago decided to retire once Henry Kissinger, who's still with us, by the way, got the Nobel Peace Prize because he felt that satire was dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just incredible, really.
I mean, I do think it's been interesting seeing, and it's sad. I do think it's sad that the Tories have lost people like Rory Stewart, because I think while they had members like that and high-profile members like that, whether they agreed with them or not, it showed it was a broad church, and it showed that they had people who do have some integrity. I mean, whether you agree with Stewart or not and his ideas or his politics, but he does care, and he's incredibly knowledgeable about foreign affairs as well. He can talk knowledgeably, he can talk with concern and compassion, and getting rid of all of those people, it's just, they really have, they've unmasked themselves.
I couldn't see Liz Truss ever reaching high office. And, well, May demoted her within the cabinet, if I remember correctly, and then Johnson then brought her to international trade. Where I do remember dead ringers really ripping into her when she was at international. Well, they do generally, but I mean, when she was at international trade, especially. And then the Foreign Office, but I couldn't imagine Liz Truss having such roles under Cameron and the Major. Thatcher wouldn't have let her.
No.
You know, she would have been a middle-ranking minister at best in previous times, and it's just I think the dearth of talent allowed, you know.
Well, the fact that they're talking about Penny Mordaunt, and what's she good at? Holding a sword. She wasn't a great minister. She's not got a great track record in Parliament, but she can hold a sword really well.
And a lot of people fancy her as well, which adds to that. You would be amazed. When people mention their political crushes, Penny Mordaunt.
Whoa.
She's done her obligatory stint on reality TV a long time ago, like Nadine Dorries.
Splash.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the Tory MPs just seem to be in it to pursue their media careers.
Female friend who insists she's. Oh yeah, it's.
Warren, who do you rate from the Tory side? Do you think there's anybody there?
That's the worrying thing. They're kind of thinking ahead.
I mean, a lot to disagree with him about, and a lot to criticise him for, but Tom Tugendhat, I suppose, is someone with a bit of sort of foreign policy, security policy, bit of gravitas. Is the only one who springs to mind, and
Yeah.
I'm sure if I put my mind to it, there'd be some sort of select committee chairs who might come up as well. I think a lot
Yeah.
of those are ones that have been through the ministerial thing and out the other side, and the fact that some of those that served under Theresa May and even Boris Johnson are now looked upon as elder statespeople with a bit of gravitas, just shows how weak
Yeah.
the pool is. It's a struggle.
Yeah, and as we saw with the Privileges Committee, you know, there's going to be a lot of bad blood there. I mean, the way they behaved towards the Tory members of the Privileges Committee, it was shocking, absolutely shocking. So that, you know, there's no loyalty even to the people who have a bit of gravitas to them. So.
It's again like the states where those Republicans who voted to impeach Trump were ruthlessly dispatched.
Yeah.
Thinking of the former vice president's
Mike
daughter,
Pence.
No. Bush's and
Dick Cheney, his daughter.
Yes, Liz Cheney,
Liz
and
Cheney.
Adam Kinzinger as well. You know, people who showed some real guts in standing up to the leadership. And look how denuded the Republicans are of talent. It's no wonder that.
Also, look how, you know, craven some of them are. I mean, Lindsey Graham is absolutely shocking in the way he's prepared to roll over.
Yeah.
Ted Cruz is another one, for someone who was highly critical of Trump in 2016. I mean, we could name several, but that leads me to a final point on this. It's 1964 was the last time we saw a UK general election and US presidential election in very close proximity. We're talking about there's about less than 3 weeks between Wilson coming to power, albeit with a majority of 5, I think it was, in mid-October 64. And then about 3 weeks later, Lyndon Johnson winning that landslide in the US presidential election. Or no, obviously some of that would have been a sort of posthumous vote for John F. Kennedy. But that the closest, I think, the last time it's that. I think things are going to. Do you think there'll be, in a run up to the US presidential elections, the UK general election, do you think there will be much influence with what's going on in the US over here? In how the election's conducted, given how close they could be? Because we did see something like that in 92, which was the last.
We've lost you again.
So we keep losing you. Sorry.
Time they were held in 1 year. You had, you know, Conservatives. You're both. God, this is like those science fiction things at different threads of time. I can see myself finding that both of you are soft and freeze. It's probably the other way. I'll try and repeat myself.
Oh no, I think we heard most of what you said. I was thinking, it's interesting, you were talking about those elections, and I was thinking about Brexit, which I think definitely
quickly. Given this,
I felt that the 2016 with Brexit at the beginning of the year, or midway in the year, and then Trump in the November, I think that definitely had an impact, though it went the opposite direction.
Yeah.
I think it was somewhere with both of them had Russian influence. And let's not forget the outside agents, actors in these things. And we haven't even talked about Russian money going into the Tory party, which is, I think that to me is the biggest shocker of this administration that we've had over the last few years with its various heads. but I think that's going to be the big concern, is how these elections are going to be influenced. The entry of AI and fake deep fakes and things to try and discredit anybody who stands up against the populist candidates. I don't know what you guys think about that, but those are the things I worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah, the deep fakes thing is a worry. The technology is now so advanced that pretty much anyone can be portrayed as doing or saying anything, and with social media it gets around so fast.
Warren?
I think even at a more simple level, we've seen the Tories just stealing Republican language on the war on woke and all of those things. And you're right about Russian influence. Going back to discussion on the Lords, I think the whole Lords thing went, and Lebedev was given his pitch. That was when standards went out the window.
Yeah, I mean, the Lebedev scandal, the documentary on Channel 4 is well worth watching, about Boris Johnson's relationship with Lebedev, and it's really, really shocking, and how these things just seem to coast along. It's the Teflon nature of these politicians that shocks me.
Or how, as you say, it's some of the more shocking aspects are hardly touched on. I think we seem to be coming to the end of this. I do apologize for the occasional bad connections, but I think it's gone quickly, which is a sign that things are going, that this went well. But thank you both very much, and hopefully we'll see things more clearly in the next 12 months as to where we are, and hopefully we'll probably have more discussions like this nearer the time. But thank you both, Warren.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, it's a pleasure to have you both here. Thank you.